Elder Race Part 10. Mother, Mother.
We, who wish to lay the foundation for gentleness, could not ourselves be gentle. But you, when at last the time comes, that man can aid his fellow man, should think upon us with leniency. Bertolt Brecht and Die Nachgeborenen. Androm Winchester. 3 months after Androm's folly. Imperial Palace Square. Earth. Traitors. Traitors everywhere. And here was another. Sniveling. Pathetic. Imperfect. This thing that knelt before him, battered and bruised beyond all recognition. This abomination was not human. It was an aberration of that sacred and glorious gene that made humanity great. It was a traitor to the cause. It was nothing, worthy of nothing, and amounting to nothing. It would be erased.
Raise its head.
Androm intoned, his voice crackling with a power that only great men could possess. The guards on either side of it grabbed its head by the hair and dragged its eyes to meet its own. He stared into its green eyes and found only revulsion. To stand against him was to stand against humanity itself. Who could be so unnatural? The screaming crowds that lined the square appeared to agree. There were factions of the people who had been unruly of late. Originating in the far reaches, a wave of protest and violence had rocked the Imperium. It was unorganized, vulgar, and so far easily controlled. Regardless of the inefficacy of these foolish rebellions and individual acts of violence against the Imperium, Androm found himself worrying about the predicament this posed even as he pronounced the fate of the worm before him.
Give it to the wheel.
The insect blanched, and its jaw worked out its protestations, even as the angry glint in its eyes died in the face of its despair. Androm knew that it was broken, despite the vehement curses and defiant slurs. Catherine's wheel, named for the Christian saint who had endured it, was a most painful way to die. It would be tied to a wagon wheel with its arms and legs spread. The executioner would use a heavy mallet to crush its limbs one by one, pulverizing its bones to dust and twisting them about the wheel. The victim would be injected with drugs so that it would not lose consciousness. When the executioner was satisfied and the victim screamed its throat hoarse, the mallet would descend towards the victim's chest to end the ordeal. The thing before him had earned this fate when it had attempted to bomb the Imperial Palace and refused to name its compatriots. Even in the face of such harsh questioning, it would not break. A flicker of respect hid behind his revulsion. It was strong but not strong enough. The wheel would break it, and it would scream the names of anyone that came to mind. But it was far too late for mercy. The guards dragged it, kicking and weeping, to the podium at the center of the square. Androm strode along behind them, his face stony and impassive in the face of its desperation. They mounted the steps, the traitor's feet scrabbling at the sharp edges in convulsions as if it could already feel death's gentle touch upon its neck. They tied its spread eagle to the wagon wheel as Androm stood facing the crowd before them. The people needed an example. They needed to see his strength. The crowd roared, ravenous for blood, many of whom were dominated by the voice lurking inside his head. Those who did not fall to that way would fall prey to another. There were many ways to inspire fear, uncountable ways to demand loyalty. He would stride forth and repair the Imperium. He would beat back the tides of rebellion before they became unmanageable.
Know this.
Androm boomed.
There are those amongst us that are not truly human. They wish for this great thing we are building to fail. They wish for humanity and its empire to crumble into the dust. This will not happen. I will not allow it. They hide in cowardice amongst us, murdering and stealing. They sacrifice the lives of the innocent for the gain of the few. They work against the good of us all. They fight against the empire. I declare them our enemies. I declare them non-human. I will stamp their traitorous bones into the muddy waters of their dishonor. I will protect you all. Let it be known, on this day, that those who would harm the empire of man shall receive no mercy. Let it begin with this thing.
Androm stepped aside as the crowd howled out all its outrage and bloodlust. He nodded at the executioner, whose face hardened into stone. The mallet came down. The screams rose up. Red blood flowed. Adam. 3 months after Androm's folly. Location classified. Council space. He was in a dream garden mind world, and that is what he knew. He knew that the hate wolf rage had broken from its chains and ruined the garden with dead flesh. He knew that friend Carlos, user helper Carlos, had stopped the hate wolf rage in its tracks. Adam knew a great many things, but those things did not matter in the face of the one big thing. The new bad thing. Vildasi was gone. Taken. And in one world he could never have her back. He did not belong to that world. In that world Vildasi was dead, her back all cut and broken, with too much blood outside her body. In that world, Adam's body lay sleeping dead alive on a bed, with all sorts of tubes stuck into his gooey parts, as user helper Carlos sat by his side in chains. Only pain lived in that world. But in the dream garden mind world, Vildasi still lived, and the garden remained.
How's the tea, Vildasi? How does the hot leafy juice taste?
Adam rumble-barked, hoping to hear her sing-song. But she smiled, a sad, happy, slow-joy smile, and nodded, before taking another sip. They sat side by side in the garden, and the sun rubbed and warmed their backs.
How come he's not awake, Mom? His wounds healed up weeks ago.
Adam ignored the hollow rumble bark that seemed to echo across the world like a big owl bell. Sometimes he'd hear the voices arguing and snarling, sometimes soft and sweet. A man and a lady. A lady called Shilin and user helper Carlos. They'd sneak into his world and try to break it with their rumble barks and warbles. This was the world that they did not belong to, and they were trying to drag him back to the world that he had left behind. The world without Vildasi.
I'm sorry, Adam.
Vildasi sing-songed.
I'm so sorry.
Adam turned to look at her, and there was blue leaking down her back. Little pieces of soot seemed to float meander in the air like drunken bits of snow. This always happened when the voices spoke. The voices told each other story tales of fire and blood, of a man called Androm Winchester Tainted who was hurting the galaxy. They made the garden sick.
The tea, Vildasi. The tea is good delicious, see? Tell me how it tastes.
Adam Needle warbled pleaded. But Vildasi just sipped the tea and smiled a sad, happy, slow joy smile. Her pretty, beautiful, dark star black eyes glistened a little with weeping water.
I'm sorry.
Came the sing-song, barely a whisper, barely there.
Tea's good, bud.
Came the rumble-bark grunt from Adam's other side. Their sun was setting at their backs, and Adam wanted to turn to see, but instead he looked at Carlos on the other side. Carlos' eyes were in stark gray and cold freezing, like always, like forever. They saw the things the Adam saw. They felt the things that Adam felt. Vildasi's heart sing-songed for him to reach out for peace. Carlos's heart rumbled and marched beside him. His heart was strong, dependable, killer, broken brother, user helper. Vildasi's heart seemed to be see-through. Not quite in time. Not quite believable. Weak against the strong beat of Carlos' heart.
I'm sorry, Adam, but I had to go.
Came the sing-song, fading away, fading to dark.
Shilin, you ain't gonna believe this.
I know.
Adam softly, rumble-bark warbled.
I didn't want you to go, but you did. And now I'm all alone. Stay with me in the garden. Stay with me.
He felt strong killer reassuring hands upon his shoulders.
You ain't alone, bud. I got you. She's gone, but I'm here. I got your back.
Mom, he's waking up.
Shilin. 3 months after Androm's folly. Secure location. Council station. Council space. Shilin looked on as a gentle pleasure warmed its way across her insides. The Ulfrendar, this Adam, had awoken to Carlos at his bedside, and she was seeing a strange mix of jubilation and grief. The surge of emotions was probably overwhelming for both inexperienced Carlos, who had never had reason to believe that any friend of his would ever return to him from the brink of death, and damaged Adam, whose capacity to reason through and accept his emotional state could be considered underwhelming at best. And yet here she sat, watching the two bumble through it like highly volatile and deadly puppies. She was pleased for 2 reasons, one of which was a genuine delight at the survival of these 2 men. One was young and inexperienced, and the other was old and dangerous beyond measure. The two had seen far too much pain in what experiences life had deemed to be theirs. It was good that they had found each other. The other reason was far more pragmatic and less humane. The simple truth was that it suited her purposes for them to have done so. It was very likely that Carlos and Adam would bond as Ulfrendar and Handler, thus providing her with a valuable resource. Fight against Winchester would be long, hard, and bloody, and she needed everything she could possibly amass to win it. If that meant asking the children to fight, then so be it. She nodded, smiled, and took her leave. It had been a long day for everyone, and she found herself craving a bed to lay down her weary body. She quickly exited the medical area and walked towards the dormitories. Even though this was a secure section of the council station that did not allow access to the civilian populace, she still had to weave her way through crowded corridors. Her announcement of the taint's existence to the council had galvanized the myriad of races into levels of diplomatic activity previously unheard of, filling the restricted areas of the council stations to the brim with diplomatic staff, administrators, and military attachés. Even so, with so many eyes drifting around her, a few too many lingered upon her. A few too many seemed to exude a hard and calculating intent. They should not be able to recognize her as a human, hooded and cloaked as she was, but she was under no doubt that the steely eyes that followed her knew exactly who and what she was. She also noticed that a great many of them seemed to be Karach. Shilin sighed to herself. Whilst she had been largely successful in gaining the limited trust and cooperation of many of the council factions, the Karok had been largely resistant to her charms and diplomatic acumen. They acted like recalcitrant children. As Shilin continued, quick glances and sliding eyes told her that she was picking up more followers. 9 in total, she believed. It had been a long time since she had had to fight, and in most situations she would have made use of Station Sec to deal with her current predicament. But this presented her with a fine opportunity. 3 of her followers were Andorran Shriekers, most likely mercenaries or hired guns, and 2 of the Karak appeared to be of Khanti stock. Both subspecies had a proud martial tradition, and were more often likely to follow leaders of unusual strength. The rest of her followers were normal Karak regulars, no doubt conscripted by the Karak delegate to put an end to one of many humans that had destroyed her race. Shilin began her breathing exercises as she walked and crossed into a by-corridor that she often used on her way back from visiting Adam. It rarely played host to any pedestrian traffic, and she had noticed a distinct lack of security cameras along its length. Narrow and private, it was perfect for what she had in mind. Her mind empty and ready to move like a leaf on the wind, her heart descended into a bed of stone. Shilin turned to face the way she had come. It was not long before her stalkers rounded the corner to find her waiting for them. They were armed, Shilin could see, with pistols and short, deadly vibro blades. They didn't get the chance to draw their weapons before Shilin was amongst them. 2 quick steps and a palm strike knocked a Karak unconscious, his body slumping and the scales along his jaw cracked. A quick pivot and a spinning elbow cracked another's ribs before transitioning into an upward palm strike into the jaw. Another fell. Moving too quick for thought, Shilin surrendered herself to the moment, allowing her body to make its own decisions. To see and exploit an opening before her mind was conscious of its existence. She was a reed trapped by the wind, swaying around and below strikes. The 3 that were left had drawn their weapons now, but the movement to free them from their holsters had cost them the initiative. 2 collapsed under successive blows before their weapons could be leveled, and the last fell back, clutching at her arm. Shilin stood poised above the Andorran Shrieker, the last of her pursuers who remained conscious.
I will not kill you,
Shilin said slowly.
but I will discipline you if you disobey me. You were sent here by the Karak delegate. Where is she?
The Shrieker met Shilin's eyes before lowering them. Shilin was satisfied. She knew that she already held sway over the Shrieker. It was their instinct to follow the most physically dominant leader that they could, whilst their Andorran cousins valued wisdom and social skills above all else.
She is in her quarters. There is a hidden way that the Karok Black Ops were ordered to use when reporting directly to her. They believed we did not know.
Shilin smiled graciously down at her new child.
Lead on.
Clan leader Vitra Aki of Clan Slutenok, delegate for the Karak remnants. 3 months after Androm's folly. Delegates' quarters. Council Station. Council Space. Vitraki luxuriated under the ultraviolet rays of the sunbed, feeling the delicious warmth seep into every molecule of her being. It was pure heaven. Although she would happily stay in there for hours more, she knew it was time for her to get out. There was far too much work to do. Dozens of reports to file, families to help repatriate, troops to supply, council business to consider, and, of course, the small matter of that human's elimination. She could not fathom why the council continued to allow her to do as she pleased. That vile murdering ape had the council twisted about her little finger. But not the Karok. Never again would the Karok fall prey to humanity. She crossed into her darkened living room and gathered up her sunrobe, which was designed to keep as much of the warmth radiating from her UV-warm scales circulating through her body for as long as possible. Yes, she reasoned, it was only right that the human should die. She looked forward to hearing the news of Shilin's unnatural demise at any moment.
Hello?
Came a pleasant greeting from the gloom behind her. Vitraki spun instantly, clutching at the short assassin's vibroblade she always kept in a sheath on her person. There was a shape, vaguely humanoid, sitting in one of the plush armchairs in her living area. Vitraki clapped twice, and suddenly the room was bathed with light. Shilin sat comfortably, with the unconscious forms of Vitraki's personal guards lying crumpled on the floor behind her. On the table in front of Shilin sat a steaming pot and 2 cups.
In days long past, my people would serve tea when we discussed matters of great importance. Please, sit and have a cup with me.
Vitraki crossed the room quickly, her vibroblade flashing towards Shilin's neck. Shilin deftly swayed backward, the blade passing millimeters from her throat before lashing out and knocking the blade from Vitraki's hand. With the blade safely spinning away, Shilin's foot flashed forward before it stuck into the floor and shoved Vitraki back into her chair. There was a moment of strained silence, as Vitraki remained crumpled in her chair and glared at Shilin, breathing heavily. Shilin, for her part, looked so calm it was as if nothing had happened. Her body exuded the peaceful stillness of water in a calm pond.
That was impolite,
Shilin stated.
That is none of my concern.
Vitraki snarled.
What in all the gods are you doing here?
I merely wish to talk.
You should be dead.
As should you. How many times have I had the chance to kill you since I entered your quarters? How many of your guards did I defeat? How many of your assassins? How many did I kill? You should be asking yourself these questions.
Vitraki remained silent.
I've had over 100 different chances to kill you since I entered your quarters. I have beaten 8 of your guards and 9 of your assassins. All of this I have done with my bare hands, and without killing a single one of them.
Shilin poured Vitraki a cup of tea that was pointedly ignored. She began to speak as she poured her own.
Now the next question, perhaps the most important to answer, is why? Why have I not killed you? Why did I not kill your guards? Why did I not kill the assassins?
We are no use to you dead.
Vitraki hissed.
Yes.
Shilin smiled.
And no, I am 578 years old. A solid 2 centuries of that has been so drenched in blood that it is a miracle that I have not drowned. I am tired of death. I am tired of killing. It is unnecessary and wasteful. I much rather work with people, even those who oppose me, towards achieving a common end, rather than murdering anyone who happens to disagree with my point of view. I do not wish to end your life and the lives of your underlings unless absolutely necessary.
Shilin's voice turned hard and brittle as shale.
But know this. I will crush you if you continue to threaten the survival of this galaxy with your foolishness.
Shilin stood up and carefully straightened her clothing.
Think about it. Will you kill me for petty revenge, or will you work with me to save what is left? I know the man responsible for the atrocities committed against your people. His name is Androm Winchester. Aid me in stopping the taint, which is in your best interest, and I can give him to you.
Vitraki defiantly glared at Shilin's back as she left the room, daintily stepping over the bodies of Vitraki's guards as she did so. The glare broke and fell from her face in tatters as soon as she was alone.